basically, if you look back in history, and this is part of what I talk about in the Midnight Kingdom, you see these moments where all of a sudden everything changes. And during the age of industrialization, you have to have, railroads. All of a sudden you're using oil, you're building these big giant cities and factories. A very, very small group of people make incredible fortunes. And once you reach a certain point of wealth, like there's nothing else to buy except for the government. And you start buying the government more and more and more. And then eventually you look up and you're like, representative democracy is a problem. Like we can't have the regular people making choices. So there is this thing that happened. And this is one of the things that when we tell our stories about history, we miss. Fascism, Nazism, authoritarianism in the 20th century, it was bolstered by the robber barons who made their money off of industrialization.
Well, the same thing happened in Germany because it was Krupp and all these other guys that began to work with Hitler saying, we don't like him, he's an idiot, he's a rube, but we're going to use him because we've got too much chaos and he's going to guarantee us making a fortune. And all the way up until the end of the world, they were actually using slave labor and all the rest of it that's who Mercedes came from, by the way, and Volkswagen and Audi and Porsche as well. I mean, these companies are all still in existence, making billions now. And it's nice to remember they had that same beginning.
And it's nice to remember that as like the Great Depression is happening, and I got to tell you, like as our conditions get worse, we need to look at this period and understand what happened. Everybody now likes to tell the story that Franklin D. Roosevelt showed up and said, let's have a new deal, and everyone supported him. That's not what happened. America's corporations and wealthy came out against him. In fact, they tried to carry out a coup. And eventually they pushed their money to Adolf Hitler, Benito Mussolini, who, by the way, were completely lauded by everybody from the New York Times to the Washington Post. So there are these moments of crisis. And when these crises happen, the wealthy and even the middle class a lot of the time, which unfortunately is what I think is happening right now, they look at the crisis and they say, man, I don't like the way these guys are doing things, but somebody needs to install some discipline, right? Somebody needs to protect my wealth, my property. And I got to tell you, these tech barons, they don't care about democracy. They see democracy as an outdated idea. They see the government as this old dinosaur that needs tech managers to come in and regulate it. They basically want an executive, which a reminder is what they thought Mussolini and Hitler were. They thought it was somebody who could come in with a strong hand and regulate these things. So right now we're looking at a political system that's been completely bought. We're looking at a wealth class that is historically rich and powerful and has a surveillance state, the likes of which only reside in our nightmares. They have a new idea.
A lot of the money they've made has come from creating technology that actually facilitates a surveillance state, which, by the way, is already being very effectively used all the way down to the last cell phone in China right now.
Absolutely.
So there's an authoritarian model / authoritarian fascist dictatorship already that is essentially taking all this technology and doing what we will be doing here a few years from now if we stay on this path.
100%. And to go along with our conversation about religious ideology is the story that explains things. It's really important because everybody likes to tell the story about fascism and Nazism like, oh, they gave amazing speeches. And that's why people did it. No, what it was a religious revival. There was a moment when secular government and secular society started to lose its luster and people lost faith in things. And people came along and they said, we're going to have a revival, much like, by the way, what the evangelical right and Ronald Reagan did in the 1980s. You come out and all of a sudden you reinstall religion. Nazism, a religion. Fascism, a religion, all of it tinged, by the way, with Christianity and the Christian narrative.
Well, and treat the existing old order religious figures very sympathetically. You invite the bishops to bless your stuff. The Lutheran Church comes in. The evangelical churches come in Germany, etc. The French Roman Catholic Church, such as it was in France, goes with the collaborationist Vichy government. It's always the same relationship.
And so what ends up happening, and this is how this cycle continues. So, for instance, you want to talk about my family, they sacrifice their bodies in factories, right? My family sacrificed their bodies in factories and in their labor. One of the reasons they did it is because they had a religious belief. They believed that God was looking down and smiling on their efforts, right? They would be rewarded in heaven. And on top of that, they were doing it in service of America and its institutions. They might not have been aware of that, but that was the story that kept them going in and working for subpar labor.
Yes, slightly in the glow of Rosie the Riveter sort of removed.
Exactly.